The sniper's bullet whistled past Sergeant Collins' head, missing by inches. Genesis Rodriguez lay motionless in muddy water 800 meters away, watching through her scope. For 6 months, they'd called her the radio girl. Kept her behind communication equipment while real Marines handled dangerous work. But today, when an enemy marksman had their entire platoon pinned down and terrified, she was about to show them what a ghost could do when nobody was watching. Picture this: Forward Operating Base Evergreen, Florida swamplands. Morning briefing in a cramped tent. Genesis Rodriguez sits in the back corner, barely visible among towering Marines surrounding her. At 22, she stands 5 feet 4 inches and weighs 115 pounds. Olive skin, dark eyes reflecting her Spanish heritage. Grew up in southern France before enlisting. But here's what they didn't know. Those childhood summers in the Pyrenees with her grandfather? He was a retired French military sniper. Today's patrol routes, Captain Morrison announces, pointing to the tactical map. Reports of enemy activity in sectors 4 and 7. Possible sniper team. Genesis leans forward, studying terrain features. She knows those sectors intimately. Has memorized every elevation change during off-duty hours. Around her, seasoned Marines exchange knowing glances. They've earned their place through proven combat effectiveness. Genesis? She earned hers through technical proficiency, keeping communication systems working in humid, corrosive swamp conditions. Rodriguez, Morrison's voice cuts through. You're on base communications today. Monitor frequencies, maintain equipment readiness. The same assignment. 23 consecutive missions. As the briefing disperses, Genesis catches familiar fragments. Good thing Rodriguez stays on base, Jenkins mutters to Martinez. Can you imagine trying to haul her through those swamps if things went bad? She'd be more liability than asset. Martinez nods. She's solid with tech stuff, but this isn't a job for someone built like a high school student. Each comment reinforces the invisible barrier between Genesis and real Marine work. Doesn't matter that she can disassemble and reassemble a radio faster than anyone in the unit. Doesn't matter that her technical innovations improved communication range by 40%. When it comes to combat operations, too small, too weak, too much of a risk. The cruel irony? In Spanish mountains, her size was an advantage. She could move through underbrush without disturbing a leaf. Remain motionless for hours while tracking game. Place shots with precision that amazed her grandfather. But those skills belonged to a different world. One where patience and precision mattered more than physical presence. What her fellow Marines didn't know. Genesis had been conducting her own intelligence operation for months. Every evening after official duties, she'd slip through the base perimeter into the swamp. Moving with silent precision her grandfather taught her in the Pyrenees. While others relaxed, Genesis mapped every conceivable sniper position within 3 miles of the base. Her hidden notebook contained detailed range cards for 47 potential hide sites. Each analyzed for approach routes, escape paths, environmental factors. She knew which positions would be favored at different times based on sun angles. Which locations offered best natural camouflage. How seasonal water levels affected accessibility. The work was meticulous. Dangerous. Moving through night swamps required skills most Marines never developed. Genesis learned to read subtle signs indicating solid ground versus hidden sinkholes. Distinguish between logs and alligators in murky water. Move through dense vegetation without creating noise. Her small frame was an advantage here. Navigating passages impossible for larger individuals. She'd also been conducting unauthorized weapons training. Hidden beneath her cot, a modified M24 sniper rifle, requisitioned through creative equipment regulations. Officially signed out for communications equipment testing. The rifle was zeroed and maintained. Genesis practiced during pre-dawn hours when base was quiet and swamp fog provided concealment. She'd identified a natural shooting range in remote wetlands where she could engage targets up to 1,200 meters without detection. At 800 meters, Genesis could consistently place shots within a 2-inch group. At 1,000 meters, her accuracy remained lethal. 3 weeks into deployment, Genesis requested additional training opportunities. Captain Morrison's response was swift. Rodriguez, your job is communications, not combat operations. Stay in your lane. The pattern was clear. While other Marines participated in advanced marksmanship training, Genesis inventoried supplies. When units practiced small team tactics, she updated communication protocols. During combat conditioning exercises, she calibrated radio frequencies. Each exclusion was justified by necessity. The cumulative effect: systematic separation from her unit's core mission. The breaking point came during a marksmanship competition. Off-duty Marines were engaging targets at various ranges. Genesis asked to participate. Sergeant Williams laughed outright. "Rodriguez, that rifle's probably heavier than you are. Stick to what you know." What they didn't know: Genesis had been shooting since age 8. Her grandfather taught fundamentals of marksmanship in mountains above their village. Patient stalking, breath control, reading wind and elevation, calculating leads for moving targets. Skills honed during years of hunting in terrain, more challenging than Florida swamps. But military culture valued demonstrated performance over claimed ability. Genesis had never been given the opportunity to demonstrate her skills. Genesis's situation deteriorated when her intelligence reports raised suspicion. Her detailed summaries about radio signatures she'd been tracking were dismissed as technical anomalies rather than tactical intelligence. Captain Morrison called her in for a clarification discussion. "Rodriguez, your reports show detail that raises questions about your methods. How exactly are you gathering this intelligence? Your communication duties don't typically provide access to tactical information you're including." The meeting left Genesis with distinct impression that her initiative was being reframed as potential overreach. Suspicion crystallized during a security briefing. Sergeant Williams made what seemed like an offhand comment about personnel staying within authorized areas of responsibility. But his eyes found Genesis as he spoke. "We've had reports of personnel accessing areas and information outside their normal duties. While curiosity is natural, operational security requires appropriate boundaries. Any unusual activity should be reported through proper channels." Her reputation for thoroughness was being recast as security risk. The summons to Captain Morrison's office came at 0630, delivered by Sergeant Williams with an expression suggesting something serious. Morrison's office felt smaller, cramped by presence of 2 additional officers: Major Patricia Hawkins from Base Intelligence, Lieutenant Colonel James Bradford from Internal Affairs. "Specialist Rodriguez," Morrison began formally, "you're here because your recent activities have raised concerns about your understanding of role and responsibilities. We need to address questions about your conduct." Major Hawkins opened Genesis's personnel file, supplemented with additional documents. "Rodriguez, your service record shows consistent technical proficiency. However, there have been reports of behavior suggesting you may be operating outside scope of assigned duties." The accusation hung in air like smoke from discharged weapon. "Specifically," Lieutenant Colonel Bradford interjected, "we're concerned about your repeated requests for information and training outside your communication specialty. Your supervisors report you've been asking detailed questions about tactical procedures, weapon specifications, operational planning that fall beyond your need-to-know requirements." Genesis recognized careful phrasing designed to make legitimate curiosity sound like potential espionage. "Sir, I believe understanding the broader mission helps me perform communications duties more effectively. The more I know about what our Marines are doing in the field, the better I can anticipate their support needs." "That's admirable," Major Hawkins replied, tone suggesting she found nothing admirable about it. "But it doesn't explain why you've been conducting unauthorized analysis of intelligence data or accessing terrain information that has no bearing on your communications responsibilities." The intelligence analysis was harder to defend. Genesis had been correlating data from multiple sources to develop assessments of enemy activity patterns. Work that technically fell outside authorized duties. "Ma'am, I noticed patterns in radio traffic that seemed significant. I thought providing analysis would be helpful to operational planning. That analysis should be conducted by qualified personnel through proper channels," Bradford stated firmly. "When support personnel begin making independent assessments of tactical intelligence, it creates confusion and potential security risks." Morrison leaned forward, expression mixing disappointment with concern. "Rodriguez, the pattern we're seeing suggests someone who doesn't understand military hierarchy and chain of responsibility. You seem to believe your individual initiative should override established procedures." The accusation struck at Genesis's frustration. She'd spent months watching qualified personnel miss opportunities and overlook threats she could have addressed. Prevented from contributing by artificial boundaries that prioritized bureaucratic order over tactical effectiveness. "Have you?" Hawkins asked, pulling out a document that made Genesis's stomach clench. Because we have reports of you leaving base during off-duty hours without logging destination or purpose. Where exactly have you been going during these unauthorized excursions? The moment Genesis had dreaded. Her evening missions into Swamp were clear violations of base security protocols, regardless of tactical value. I've been conducting personal training exercises in surrounding area. Physical conditioning and terrain familiarization that I thought would make me a more effective Marine. Bradford's expression suggested he found the explanation insufficient. Personal training that requires leaving base without authorization and spending hours in potentially hostile territory? That doesn't sound like standard physical conditioning, Rodriguez. It sounds like you've been conducting unauthorized reconnaissance operations. Direct accusation forced Genesis to confront reality. Her dedication had crossed lines she'd rationalized as necessary for mission effectiveness, but which clearly violated established security protocols. Lieutenant Colonel, my activities were always focused on improving my ability to serve this unit. I never intended to violate security protocols or exceed my authority. I was simply trying to be prepared for any situation where my skills might be needed. That's precisely the problem, Morrison replied, voice carrying weight of official judgment. It's not your responsibility to decide what skills might be needed or when. That determination is made by qualified officers based on comprehensive assessment of unit capabilities and mission requirements. Major Hawkins closed the file, fixed Genesis with final stare. Rodriguez, your intentions may have been good, but your methods demonstrate fundamental misunderstanding of military structure and discipline. Individual initiative that operates outside proper channels isn't heroic. It's dangerous to unit cohesion and operational security. The silence carried weight of career-ending consequences. Going forward, Bradford announced, you'll be restricted to base except for official duties. Your access to tactical intelligence will be limited to information directly relevant to your communications responsibilities. Any requests for additional training must be submitted through proper channels. Morrison added the final blow. Consider this an official reprimand, Rodriguez. Any further activities outside your assigned role will result in disciplinary action up to and including discharge from the Marine Corps. Is that clear? Yes, sir. The emergency klaxon shattered routine quiet of forward operating base Evergreen at 1,347 hours on what had begun as unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. Genesis was updating communication logs when piercing alarms sent every Marine scrambling for emergency positions. The sound meant one thing: immediate threat to base security requiring all hands response. She abandoned paperwork, rushed toward command center, heart hammering as overlapping radio transmissions filled airwaves with urgent, fragmented reports. Sniper fire from northeast quadrant. Sergeant Williams' voice crackled through base communication system. Multiple positions. We've got Marines pinned down at checkpoint Charlie and Bravo. Cannot identify shooter locations. Genesis burst into command center to find controlled chaos. Captain Morrison hunched over tactical display, face grim as red indicators marked positions of Marines under fire. Situation report, Morrison barked. How many shooters are we dealing with, and where the hell are they firing from? Unknown number of enemy snipers, Martinez replied, consulting multiple radio feeds. They've got overlapping fields of fire covering our main approaches to checkpoints Bravo and Charlie. Collins and his team are trapped in the open with no cover. Rodriguez's patrol is pinned behind damaged vehicle with at least 2 wounded. Genesis felt blood turn cold recognizing names of Marines she'd served alongside for months. These weren't abstract tactical problems. They were her colleagues, people she'd shared meals with, now facing death because enemy had achieved exactly the tactical advantage she'd been preparing to counter. Do we have eyes on shooter positions? Morrison demanded. Negative. Enemy positions too well concealed. Our counter-sniper teams can't identify targets without exposing themselves to effective fire. The shooters have high ground and clear sight lines to our approaches. Genesis studied tactical display with growing recognition and horror. Enemy positions marked on screen corresponded almost exactly to locations she'd identified during unauthorized reconnaissance missions. The shooters had chosen hide sites she'd cataloged months ago as optimal for exactly this type of attack. What about helicopter support? Weather's moving in fast, reported aviation coordinator. We've got maybe 20 minutes before visibility drops below minimums. After that, no air support until storm passes. Time constraint added another layer of urgency. Genesis knew from terrain analysis that approaching weather would provide perfect cover for enemy withdrawal if they weren't neutralized quickly. "Sir," interrupted radio operator, voice straining with bad news. "Checkpoint Charlie reports Collins is hit. He's alive but needs immediate medical attention. They can't move him without exposing themselves to sniper fire." Morrison's face darkened as situation moved from serious to critical. Marines were wounded and trapped. Enemy positions remained unidentified. Time was running out. "Options," Morrison demanded. "I need solutions, not problems. How do we neutralize these shooters and get our people out of there?" Major Hawkins consulted tactical manual. "Standard protocol calls for coordinated counter-sniper response, but we'd need to identify enemy positions first. Without knowing where they're shooting from, we can't effectively return fire." "What about suppressive fire?" suggested Martinez. "Lay down covering fire while extraction teams move to pinned positions." "Too risky," Morrison replied immediately. "We don't know exact enemy positions, so suppressive fire might not be effective. Moving extraction teams across open ground under sniper fire is suicide mission." Genesis listened with growing frustration. The tactical problem they faced was exactly the scenario she'd analyzed during months of preparation. She knew the terrain, had identified likely sniper positions, understood approaches that could neutralize the threat, but her recent reprimand made offering knowledge impossible without seeming to prove every accusation about her disregard for proper authority. "Time factor is critical," added meteorologist. "Storm front will hit in 18 minutes. After that, we lose all visibility advantages and enemy can withdraw under cover." Morrison slammed fist against tactical display. "First break in professional composure since crisis began. God damn it! There has to be something we can do. I'm not going to lose Marines because we can't figure out where some bastard with rifle is hiding." The silence was filled with crackling radio communications from pinned patrols. Genesis could hear strain in familiar voices as Marines tried to maintain positions under effective enemy fire. Collins was wounded and needed medical attention. Rodriguez's team was running low on ammunition. Enemy held every tactical advantage while Marines remained helpless to respond. Genesis stared at tactical display, seeing not just current crisis, but larger failure it represented. For months, she'd been gathering intelligence and developing capabilities specifically designed to address this type of threat. Her reconnaissance had identified exact positions now being used against them. Her training had prepared her to engage targets at ranges and angles required to neutralize enemy. Her knowledge of terrain could provide tactical advantage needed to save fellow Marines. But she was communications specialist Rodriguez, officially reprimanded for exceeding assigned role, explicitly forbidden from participating in tactical operations. The system that had spent months telling her she wasn't qualified for combat operations was now facing situation where her specific qualifications were exactly what was needed. As clock counted down toward approaching storm, and voices on radio grew more desperate, Genesis faced most important decision of her military career. She could remain silent and watch Marines die while following proper protocol, or she could speak up and risk everything to save lives. Genesis stepped forward, voice cutting through tense discussions like blade through silence. "Sir, I know where those shooters are positioned." Every head turned toward her, expressions ranging from surprise to skepticism to outright dismissal. "Rodriguez, this is not the time for speculation," Morrison's face darkened. "We need confirmed intelligence, not guesswork from personnel outside their area of expertise." "It's not guesswork, sir. I've been mapping potential sniper positions in this area for months. The locations they're using match positions I identified during terrain analysis. I can tell you exactly where they are and how to approach them." Major Hawkins looked up with disbelief. "Specialist Rodriguez, you're a communications technician. How could you possibly have intelligence about enemy sniper positions that our reconnaissance teams don't possess?" Genesis realized explaining unauthorized activities would confirm every suspicion about her disregard for proper authority. But Marines were dying while they debated her qualifications. "Ma'am, I've been conducting detailed terrain analysis during off-duty hours. I've identified 47 potential hide sites within effective range of the base, including the 3 positions currently being used by enemy shooters." Morrison's expression shifted from irritation to anger as he processed implications. "You've been conducting unauthorized reconnaissance operations despite explicit orders to limit yourself to communications duties. Rodriguez, you were specifically ordered to cease activities outside your assigned role. Yes, sir. But right now, that unauthorized intelligence is the only thing that can save Collins and the others. I know where the shooters are, and I know how to reach them. Staff Sergeant Martinez stepped forward, tone mixing professional skepticism with genuine curiosity. Even if you somehow know the sniper positions, what exactly are you proposing? Our counter-sniper teams can't get clear shots without exposing themselves. Genesis moved to tactical display, finger tracing routes through swamp terrain that appeared impossible to navigate. The enemy positions are here, here, and here. She marked 3 locations corresponding exactly to red zones on tactical map. They're using natural elevated positions with clear fields of fire, but they're also isolated from mutual support. How can you be so certain about those specific locations? Demanded Major Hawkins, intelligence background making her particularly skeptical. Because I've been there. I've mapped every approach route, every sight line, every potential escape path. The positions they've chosen are optimal for their current mission, but they're also vulnerable to flanking approaches that conventional tactics wouldn't consider. Morrison studied positions she'd indicated, then looked at tactical situation with growing frustration. Even if your intelligence is accurate, we don't have assets positioned to exploit those approaches. Our sniper teams are pinned down with everyone else. Genesis took deep breath, knowing her next words would either save lives or end her military career permanently. Sir, I can reach those positions. I have the training, the equipment, and the knowledge of terrain required to neutralize the enemy shooters. Profound silence followed her offer. Every person in command center understood she'd just volunteered for what amounted to solo mission against entrenched enemy positions. A tactical scenario that violated every principle of unit integrity and mutual support. Absolutely not, Morrison replied immediately. Rodriguez, you're a communications specialist, not a sniper. I'm not sending untrained personnel on suicide missions based on unauthorized intelligence of questionable accuracy. Sir, with respect, the current approach isn't working. Collins needs medical attention that he can't receive while pinned down. Every minute we spend debating alternatives is a minute closer to losing Marines we could save. Major Hawkins consulted her watch. Captain, we have 14 minutes before weather conditions eliminate visibility. If we're going to act, it has to be now. Genesis saw opening provided by time constraint. Sir, I can reach the primary sniper position in 12 minutes using routes that provide concealment from enemy observation. Once I neutralize the primary threat, your teams can move to assist the pinned patrols. You can't possibly know that, Martinez interjected. Even if you've somehow mapped the terrain, you've never conducted actual combat operations. Theory and practice are completely different things. Genesis met his skeptical gaze directly. Sergeant, I've been training for exactly this scenario for 6 months. I have the specialized equipment, the marksmanship skills, and the terrain knowledge required to execute this mission. The only question is whether command will authorize me to use those capabilities. Morrison studied her with expression, mixing professional assessment with personal conflict. She could see him weighing risks of authorizing unprecedented mission against certainty of losing Marines if no action was taken. Rodriguez, even if I believed you had necessary skills, sending single Marine against multiple enemy positions violates every tactical principle we operate under. It's not how we conduct operations. Sir, conventional operations haven't worked. The enemy has achieved tactical surprise using positions that our standard reconnaissance missed. Sometimes unconventional problems require unconventional solutions. Radio crackled with another update from pinned patrols. Collins' team reporting his condition was deteriorating, and they were running critically low on ammunition. Captain, Genesis said quietly, you have 12 minutes to decide whether you trust me to save those Marines, or whether you prefer to follow protocol and hope that conventional solutions will somehow become effective before people die. Morrison looked at tactical display, then at faces of his staff, then back at young woman who'd just offered to risk everything to save fellow Marines. Weight of command had never felt heavier. The answer is no, Rodriguez. I won't authorize solo mission by unqualified personnel based on unauthorized intelligence. We follow proper procedures and wait for reinforcements. Genesis stood motionless for 30 seconds after Morrison's final rejection, watching tactical display as red indicators continued marking positions of Marines trapped under effective enemy fire. Radio chatter grew increasingly desperate. Collins' team reported his breathing was becoming labored, and they were down to their last magazine. She made her decision with cold clarity her grandfather had taught her during hunting expeditions in Pyrenees. Sometimes the shot had to be taken regardless of whether anyone else believed it was possible. "Understood, sir," Genesis replied, voice carrying no trace of rebellion crystallizing in her mind. "I'll return to my communications duties and monitor the situation from the bunker." Morrison nodded curtly, already turning attention back to tactical problem. But instead of heading toward communications bunker, Genesis made deliberate turn toward her quarters, moving with purposeful stride of someone conducting routine duties, rather than preparing for insubordination. In her quarters, Genesis opened waterproof case hidden beneath her cot and began assembling equipment no one knew she possessed. Modified M24 sniper rifle emerged from concealment along with specialized ammunition, range-finding equipment, and ghillie suit she'd customized for swamp operations. Every piece of gear had been carefully selected and maintained for exactly this moment. She dressed quickly but methodically, transforming herself from communications specialist Rodriguez into something the Marine Corps had never officially trained or recognized: a precision marksman prepared for solo operations in hostile territory. The most difficult part of preparation was writing brief note she left on her bunk. In it, she explained her actions and provided detailed intelligence about enemy positions that could assist follow-up operations if her mission failed. She also included coordinates for her planned route and timeline, information that would help recovery teams locate her body if worst occurred. Genesis slipped out of quarters at 1,402 hours, moving through base with confident purposefulness that had always made her invisible to casual observation. Her route took her past motor pool, through supply depot, and finally to maintenance gate she'd used during unauthorized reconnaissance missions. Lock yielded to her practiced manipulation, and she disappeared into swamp without triggering security alerts. Terrain that had challenged her during months of training now felt familiar beneath her feet. Genesis moved through dense vegetation with fluid efficiency, reading subtle signs that indicated safe footing versus hidden hazards. Her small stature allowed her to navigate passages that would have been impossible for larger Marines. Intimate knowledge of area let her select routes that provided maximum concealment. As she moved toward enemy positions, Genesis could hear distant sound of sporadic gunfire marking ongoing engagement. Acoustic signature told her enemy shooters were maintaining fire discipline, taking carefully aimed shots rather than wasting ammunition on suppressive fire. Professional snipers who understood their tactical advantage and intended to exploit it fully. Approach to primary enemy position required circuitous route that added distance but provided concealment from enemy observation. Genesis moved with patient precision her grandfather had taught her. Never rushing, never exposing herself unnecessarily, always thinking 3 moves ahead. At 1,409 hours, she established first observation post 600 meters from primary enemy sniper. Through her scope, she could see muzzle flash of enemy weapon as it continued to engage pinned Marines. Shooter was skilled and disciplined, firing from well-concealed position that would have been nearly impossible to detect without prior knowledge of its location. Genesis studied target through optics, calculating range, wind drift, and precise timing required for effective shot. Enemy sniper was positioned behind natural cover that protected him from conventional approaches, but her flanking route had provided angle that exposed his position to precision fire. Radio traffic in her earpiece continued to report deteriorating situation. Collins was unconscious now, and his team was requesting immediate medical evacuation that couldn't be provided while under effective enemy fire. At 1,412 hours, Genesis achieved final firing position. Modified M24 was steady against improvised rest. Target clearly visible through scope at range of 847 meters. Wind conditions were minimal, and her calculations indicated high probability of first-round effectiveness. She keyed radio to command frequency, knowing her transmission would reveal location and actions to everyone monitoring communications. "Base, this is Rodriguez. I have eyes on primary enemy sniper position. Requesting permission to engage." Morrison's voice erupted through radio with immediate authority and anger. "Rodriguez, what is your location? You were ordered to remain on base. Return immediately." "That's a direct order." "Sir, I have clear shot on enemy position that's pinning down Collins' team. I can neutralize primary threat and allow your forces to move." "Rodriguez, you are not authorized for combat operations. Disengage immediately and return to base." That's direct order from your commanding officer. Genesis looked through scope at enemy sniper, who continued to fire at her fellow Marines. In her earpiece, she could hear increasingly desperate communications from pinned patrols. Collins needed medical attention that he couldn't receive while enemy fire prevented evacuation. "Sir," Genesis replied quietly, "I'm taking the shot." She switched off radio, eliminating distraction of command authority that would only interfere with precision required for effective engagement. Her grandfather's voice echoed in memory. "When the moment comes, there's only you, the rifle, and the target. Everything else is noise." Genesis controlled her breathing, aligned sight picture, and began trigger squeeze that would either vindicate months of unauthorized preparation or confirm every doubt about her capabilities. M24 fired with sharp crack that echoed across swamp, sending precision round toward target that represented everything she'd been told she was too small, too weak, and too unqualified to engage. The 7.62 mm round left Genesis's rifle at 2,580 feet per second, cutting through humid Florida air with mathematical precision toward target 847 meters away. She'd calculated every variable: slight crosswind pushing from her left, minor elevation difference between her position and enemy sniper's hide, atmospheric pressure affecting bullet trajectory over extended range. Through scope, Genesis watched bullets impact with professional detachment. Enemy sniper jerked backward from firing position, weapon clattering against rocks that had provided concealment. Precise shot had found its mark exactly where grandfather's training had taught her to aim. Center mass, no wasted motion, no second chances required. Immediate change in tactical dynamics was audible through earpiece. Enemy fire that had been pinning down Collins' team ceased abruptly, replaced by excited voices reporting they were no longer under effective fire from primary position. Genesis allowed herself 3 seconds of satisfaction before shifting attention to secondary target. Second enemy sniper, positioned 400 meters northeast of first, had been alerted by sound of her shot. Genesis could see him attempting to identify her position while maintaining fire on Rodriguez's pinned patrol. Tactical situation required immediate action before remaining enemy shooters could coordinate effective response to her presence. Genesis adjusted position slightly, moving 15 meters to new firing point that provided clear sight line to secondary target while maintaining concealment from potential observation. Movement required careful attention to noise discipline. Any sound could reveal her location to enemy forces now actively searching for source of precision fire that had eliminated their primary asset. Second shot proved more challenging due to target's awareness and movement. Enemy sniper was no longer stationary behind prepared position, instead shifting between multiple firing points attempting to maintain effectiveness while avoiding counter-sniper fire. Genesis had to wait for him to settle into firing position long enough to provide stable target. Opportunity came at 1,418 hours when enemy shooter paused to engage Rodriguez's patrol with series of rapid shots. Genesis's scope found him clearly silhouetted against vegetation, and her second round impacted with same precision as first. Enemy fire from secondary position ceased immediately. Radio traffic and earpiece exploded with activity as Marines realized effective enemy fire had been substantially reduced. Collins' team reported they could now move under cover, while Rodriguez's patrol indicated they were preparing to advance from pinned position. Tactical situation had shifted dramatically in less than 6 minutes. Genesis remained focused on third enemy position located 600 meters south of her current location. This target represented greatest challenge due to distance and difficult angle required for effective engagement. Enemy sniper occupying this position had also been alerted by her previous shots and was actively seeking to identify her location. Approach to third target required Genesis to relocate across terrain offering minimal concealment from enemy observation. She moved with fluid precision that months of practice had developed, using every depression and vegetation cluster to mask movement. Ghillie suit that had seemed like excessive preparation now proved its value by breaking up her outline against varied background of swamp. At 1,423 hours, she established firing position with clear sight lines to final enemy sniper. This target proved most professional of 3, maintaining fire discipline while systematically searching for her position using methodical scanning techniques. Genesis recognized hallmarks of advanced training in enemies' movements and knew engaging this target would require perfect execution. Third shot was most difficult of engagement, requiring compensation for multiple variables across 823-meter range with crosswind factors that had shifted since previous shots. Genesis applied every technique grandfather had taught her, controlling breathing, aligning sight picture with mechanical precision, executing trigger squeeze that sent final round toward target with surgical accuracy. Impact confirmed what Genesis had known from moment she'd made decision to act. She was exactly as capable as she'd always believed herself to be. Third enemy sniper was neutralized with same precision as first two, eliminating final threat to pinned Marines and completing tactical engagement that conventional wisdom had deemed impossible for someone of her size and official qualifications. Radio chatter that followed was mixture of professional military communication and barely controlled amazement. Collins' team was moving him toward evacuation, vital signs stable enough for transport. Rodriguez's patrol was advancing to secure area and confirm enemy casualties. Immediate tactical crisis had been resolved through precision application of capabilities that Marine Corps had spent months telling Genesis she didn't possess. Morrison's voice cut through communications with unmistakable authority and barely controlled anger. Rodriguez, report your position immediately. You have violated direct orders and conducted unauthorized combat operations. You will return to base immediately for disciplinary action. Genesis keyed radio for what she knew would be her final transmission as active Marine. Base, this is Rodriguez. 3 enemy snipers neutralized. Friendly forces are no longer pinned down. Collins is stable and ready for evacuation. Mission complete. Genesis reached base perimeter at 1,447 hours, moving with same careful precision that had characterized her entire unauthorized mission. Sound of helicopter rotors indicated medical evacuation was proceeding successfully, Collins being transported to advanced medical facilities where his injuries could receive proper treatment. Immediate crisis that had threatened multiple Marine lives was over, resolved through capabilities no one had believed she possessed. As she approached main gate, Genesis could see controlled activity that marked successful resolution to emergency. Marines who had been trapped under effective enemy fire were now moving freely, conducting security sweeps and damage assessments with confidence of soldiers no longer under immediate threat. Her unauthorized actions had restored tactical initiative to friendly forces while eliminating enemy advantage that conventional approaches had failed to address. Walk to command center felt like transition between 2 different versions of herself. For past 3 hours, she had been exactly the Marine she'd always known herself capable of being. Precise, effective, deadly when necessary, and absolutely committed to safety of fellow soldiers. Now she was returning to official identity as communications specialist Rodriguez, a support person who had exceeded her authority in ways that demanded accountability. Command center buzzed with post-engagement activity as officers and senior NCOs processed tactical results and began planning follow-up operations. Maps were being updated to reflect eliminated enemy positions. Patrol routes were being adjusted to account for changed threat conditions. Genesis entered to find same tribunal that had reprimanded her just days earlier, Captain Morrison, Major Hawkins, and Lieutenant Colonel Bradford. Their expressions reflected complex mixture of professional assessment, personal conflict, and institutional confusion about how to process what had just occurred. She'd proven herself tactically, while simultaneously confirming their worst fears about her disregard for proper authority. Specialist Rodriguez, Morrison began, voice carrying weight of command authority complicated by tactical gratitude. You have successfully completed unauthorized combat mission that resulted in elimination of enemy threats and preservation of Marine lives. You have also violated direct orders, exceeded your authorized duties, and conducted operations that could have resulted in additional casualties if they had failed. Genesis stood at attention, knowing any attempt to justify her actions would only confirm accusations about her unwillingness to accept proper military authority. Yes, sir. I understand the disciplinary implications of my actions. Major Hawkins consulted documents that Genesis recognized as preliminary reports from engagement. Rodriguez, your tactical execution was flawless. 3 enemy snipers eliminated with precision fire from positions that our reconnaissance teams failed to identify. Collins is alive because of your actions, and multiple Marines avoided potential casualties because of tactical initiative you provided. Acknowledgement of her success carried weight that months of dismissed suggestions and overlooked capabilities had never achieved. Genesis had finally demonstrated exactly what she'd always claimed to be capable of, proving that size and official qualifications were less important than skill, preparation, and absolute commitment to mission accomplishment. Lieutenant Colonel Bradford leaned forward, expression reflecting institutional challenge her actions represented. The problem, Rodriguez, is that individual heroism operating outside proper command authority sets dangerous precedents. If every Marine decided which orders to follow based on their personal assessment of tactical situations, military discipline would collapse entirely. Sir, I acted because Marines were dying and I had capabilities that could save them. I never intended to undermine military authority, only to preserve lives of fellow soldiers when conventional approaches had proven inadequate. Morrison studied her with expression, mixing professional respect with command frustration. Rodriguez, your results were exceptional, but your methods were completely unacceptable. We cannot have soldiers making independent tactical decisions based on unauthorized intelligence gathering and undisclosed capabilities. Silence that followed carried weight of institutional judgment on individual initiative. Genesis understood her actions had created precedent that challenged fundamental assumptions about military hierarchy and relationship between orders and results. She'd saved lives while potentially undermining authority structure that made organized military action possible. However, Morrison continued, tone shifting in ways suggesting careful consideration of competing factors, your tactical success and lives you preserved cannot be ignored in assessing appropriate consequences. You've demonstrated capabilities this unit was unaware of and tactical knowledge that proved crucial to mission success. Genesis remained at attention, knowing next few minutes would determine whether her military career would end in court-martial proceedings or whether institutional recognition of results might override concerns about methods. She'd proven everything she'd always believed about herself, but military culture valued process as much as outcomes. Sound of helicopter rotors reminded everyone present that Collins was alive and receiving medical treatment because someone had been willing to act when authorized personnel could not. Genesis had transformed tactical disaster into successful resolution through capabilities that had been systematically undervalued and officially discouraged. Her success against overwhelming odds had validated months of unauthorized preparation while creating institutional challenges that had no easy solutions. The tribunal reconvened at 1,147 hours with atmosphere suggesting momentous decisions had been reached during deliberation. Colonel Chun's expression carried gravity of institutional judgment that would establish precedent for individual initiative within military hierarchy. Specialist Rodriguez, Chun began, voice carrying formal authority tempered by recognition of competing values. This tribunal has reached determination about your actions and your future with Marine Corps. Your unauthorized operations violated numerous regulations and demonstrated concerning disregard for proper command authority. However, your tactical capabilities and mission results were exceptional, and your actions preserved Marine lives when conventional approaches had failed. Genesis maintained position at attention, while understanding that next few minutes would determine whether her military career would continue or end in disgrace. She'd proven exactly what she'd always claimed to be capable of, but military culture valued process as much as outcomes. After extensive deliberation and consultation with Division Command, Chun continued, we've decided that your actions, while unauthorized, demonstrate exactly the kind of tactical innovation and individual initiative that Marine Corps needs to develop and utilize rather than discourage or punish. The words hit Genesis like physical impact, representing validation she'd never expected to receive from institution that had systematically undervalued her capabilities for months. Her unauthorized preparation and independent action were being reframed as assets rather than liabilities. Captain Morrison stepped forward, expression mixing command authority with personal recognition of her achievements. Rodriguez, you're being transferred immediately to Marine Special Operations Command for advanced training and assignment to reconnaissance units, where your unique combination of skills can be properly developed and utilized. Major Hawkins added details revealing how thoroughly Genesis's capabilities had been evaluated during tribunal's deliberation. Your terrain analysis and intelligence gathering abilities exceed those of many personnel with advanced training. Your marksmanship skills are exceptional, and your tactical planning proved superior to official assessments of same operational area. Recognition carried weight that months of dismissed suggestions and overlooked contributions had never achieved. Genesis was finally being acknowledged for exactly the capabilities she'd always possessed, validated by institution that had previously seen only her limitations rather than potential. Lieutenant Colonel Bradford consulted documents outlining her immediate future. You'll be enrolled in advanced reconnaissance course at Quantico, followed by specialized sniper training and tactical intelligence analysis. Your unauthorized activities have demonstrated natural aptitude for skills that Marine Corps desperately needs. Colonel Chun delivered final component of their decision with expression, suggesting institutional learning, rather than just individual recognition. Additionally, Rodriguez, your case has prompted review of our personnel evaluation and assignment procedures. Your situation revealed gaps in how we identify and utilize unconventional capabilities that don't fit standard military categories. Genesis felt overwhelming relief mixed with vindication as she processed implications of their decision. Her months of unauthorized preparation were being recognized as valuable initiative rather than dangerous insubordination. Her tactical success had opened doors that conventional approaches had kept permanently closed. However, Chun continued, tone carrying necessary balance, your methods, while ultimately successful, cannot be replicated without proper authorization and oversight. Individual initiative must operate within institutional frameworks to maintain military discipline and effectiveness. Morrison added practical implications of her new assignment. Rodriguez, your transfer includes immediate promotion to corporal and assignment to units where your capabilities will be properly challenged and utilized. You'll be working with Marines who understand and value exactly the kind of skills you've demonstrated. 6 months later, Corporal Genesis Rodriguez stood in briefing room at Camp Lejeune, addressing group of Marine reconnaissance specialists about advanced camouflage and concealment techniques in swamp environments. Her small stature, once seen as liability, was now recognized as advantage in reconnaissance operations where invisibility mattered more than physical presence. The key to effective concealment, she told assembled Marines, is understanding that environment can either work for you or against you, depending on how well you've prepared to utilize its characteristics. Her voice carried authority of proven experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Irony wasn't lost on her that she was now teaching techniques she'd developed during unauthorized activities that had nearly ended her military career. Skills that had been viewed with suspicion were now being incorporated into official training curricula, benefiting Marines who would never know their enhanced capabilities originated from one person's refusal to accept artificial limitations. Her success had created ripple effects throughout Marine Corps' approach to personnel evaluation and capability development. Genesis's case had become study in how institutional blind spots could waste human resources and miss tactical opportunities that unconventional thinking might provide. After her presentation, she was approached by Staff Sergeant Williams, who had been one of her harshest critics during her time at Forward Operating Base Evergreen. Rodriguez, he said with visible respect, I wanted to apologize for underestimating your capabilities. Your success has changed how I evaluate Marines who don't fit standard categories. Genesis accepted his acknowledgement with professional grace that military culture demanded, though she recognized his change in perspective represented broader institutional learning that extended far beyond her individual case. Her unauthorized mission had proven that size, official qualifications, and conventional wisdom were less important than skill, preparation, and absolute commitment to mission accomplishment. As she prepared for next assignment, reconnaissance mission in Southeast Asia, where her unique combination of skills would be fully utilized, Genesis reflected on transformation that had occurred since that desperate day in Florida swamp. She was no longer communications specialist Rodriguez, overlooked and underutilized. She was Corporal Rodriguez, Marine reconnaissance specialist, whose capabilities were finally being recognized and developed by institution that had learned to value unconventional potential. The radio on her desk crackled with routine communications from Marines conducting training exercises, voices carrying confidence of soldiers who knew their capabilities were valued and potential recognized. Genesis smiled as she listened, knowing her unauthorized mission had helped create an environment where other Marines might avoid systematic underestimation she'd experienced. Her story had become part of Marine Corps lore, the communications specialist who proved that determination and preparation could overcome any limitation others might imagine. But more importantly, it had become a lesson about importance of recognizing potential wherever it exists and developing capabilities that don't fit conventional categories. Genesis Rodriguez had started as someone too small to matter and had become exactly the Marine she'd always known herself capable of being. The only difference was that now everyone else knew it too. So what do you think? Could you have done what Genesis did? Would you have taken that shot when everything was on the line? Sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who've been preparing in silence, waiting for their moment to prove what they're really made of. Hit that subscribe button if this story got your heart racing, and tell me in the comments, what's the most underestimated skill you've got that nobody knows about?